When General Bradley established the high priority for the seizure of Carentan and the firm junction of the 5th and 7th Corps beachheads, he also directed that the 4th and 90th Divisions were to maintain pressure in the direction of Cherbourg so that the 9th and 82nd Airborne could seal off the peninsula. In the original 7th Corps plan, the 9th Division was to land on D-Day +4 and assemble in the Colombey-Orgland area. It was not anticipated that the division would have to fight its way there, but the slow progress of the 90th foreshadowed a serious delay in securing the Douve line and in blocking the enemy's western reinforcement corridor. On June 12th, General Collins decided to commit both the 9th and 82nd Airborne in the westward attack. At this time, the 82nd was in various stages of reorganization. The 507th and 508th Parachute Infantry Regiments assembled and reorganized with an effective strength of about 60%. The 505th and the 2nd Battalion, 325th Glider Infantry, remained in the La Ham area until the morning of June 13th, when they were relieved by a battalion of the 359th. On June 11th, the 508th was alerted for a mission south of the Douve. The regiment was ordered to cross the river at Beauzeville-la-Bastille and link up with the 101st at Baupt. This operation, beginning at midnight on June 12th, was successfully carried out, and Baupt was reached by 0800 hours. Meanwhile, the 507th and 325th Glider Infantry were alerted for the projected advance westward. The 9th Division, commanded by Major General Manton Eddy, had begun to debark on Utah Beach on June 10th as planned. The 39th Regiment was attached to the 4th Division to assist in clearing the coastal area to Keenville. The remainder of the division was unloading rapidly enough to be ready for commitment on June 14th. Both the 9th and the 82nd were to pass through the 90th and take over its objective. The 90th was to pivot northward in the direction of Monteberg to cover the north flank of the 9th. Meanwhile, in view of the previous slow progress of the 90th Division, General Collins asked General Bradley for a replacement and was given the 79th Division, which was to be deployed later. The new assignments for the 14th of June resulted in some complicated maneuvering during the following days. At no time did the 90th Division disengage entirely. It continued to attack, wheeling gradually towards its new objective. Only in the south was any unit of the division passed through and relieved by units of other divisions. The initial attack was to be led by the 358th Regiment. It was agreed that this regiment should seize the road junction 1,000 yards to the west, and that the 82nd Airborne Division was to carry the attack from there. This was done by the early afternoon, despite close-range mortar and 88mm fire from across the river. By evening, the regiment was relieved by the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment. An evening counterattack forced back the 507th a few hundred yards. At the end of the day, the two leading battalions were along the road south of Bonneville. Meanwhile, the 359th in the center had begun to turn gradually north, thus opening a gap in the 90th Division front. This gap was closed by the first elements of the 9th Division. The 60th Infantry Regiment launched its initial attack in a column of battalions, with the 3rd Battalion in the lead. As the northward turning maneuver of the 90th Division continued on the right and the 82nd Airborne on the left advanced west, the 9th Division zone in the center widened. The 60th Infantry Regiment was to capture Renouf and then advance to the high ground west of Orgland. By mid-afternoon, the two lead companies had pushed up the road to Renouf, with Company K occupying the town at 1800 hours. Shortly before midnight, General Eddy ordered the 60th Infantry to attack at 0500 the next day and push on vigorously, since enemy reinforcements were reported to be moving up. While the 60th Infantry made good progress northwestward, the 359th was opposed stubbornly, field by field. The 357th on the right flank also encountered difficulties. On June 14th, it prepared to attack Courbevoie again. An air mission arranged for 1400 hours was cancelled for lack of proper marking smoke, and an artillery preparation was substituted at 1800. Because of poor coordination, a number of shells fell on American troops and the attack became disorganized. The artillery fired again at 1930 hours, and the regiment entered the village 3 hours later. It was unable, however, to clean out enemy resistance that night. The push to win the Douve line continued with varying success on June 15th. After a full day's fighting, the 357th finally secured Courbevoie. Late in the day, the 358th attacked toward Le Calais under orders to seize the crossroads south of Urville. At the same time, the 359th intended to pass Orgland and cut the Orgland-Urville road, but the 359th gained only about 1,000 yards, far short of its objective. Substantially larger gains were made by the 82nd and 9th Divisions in their drive westward. The 82nd, attacking astride the highway to Saint-Sauveur-le-Vicomte, encountered only moderate resistance throughout the day. During the day, the 507th was relieved by the 505th Parachute Infantry. By nightfall, the 505th reached a line south of Rainville. Shortly after the attack started, the 90th Division reported 16 tanks moving south from Orgland. These tanks apparently didn't constitute part of any coordinated counterattack. Using bazookas and 57mm anti-tank guns, the men of the 60th Infantry Regiment knocked out 3 tanks and forced the rest to withdraw. By 0900, the regiment had advanced beyond the Orgland-Bonneville Road, where the 1st Battalion on the right was strongly counterattacked by 4 tanks and a battalion-sized infantry escort. It was thrown back 500 yards to the road. The commanders of Companies A and B were among the casualties. The 2nd Battalion immediately to the rear countered the enemy thrust, however, and regained half the lost ground. During the morning, the division commander had shifted the 60th Infantry's axis of attack slightly, assigning it to the mission of taking Rainville. As the 359th turned north and the 60th attacked west, it became feasible to commit another regiment. The 47th Infantry Regiment was brought in on the 60th Infantry's right and given the latter's former objective, the high ground west of Orgland. The 47th Infantry moved out shortly after noon and reached the forward slopes by nightfall. The exact strength of the enemy was unknown. In general, however, the Germans seemed to be delaying with small groups and taking advantage of good defensive ground, which compensated in part for their numerical inferiority. To keep the enemy from reinforcing and organizing a better coordinated defense, it was essential to push to the Douve River line quickly. On the afternoon of June 15th, General Collins announced that the Corps' first priority is to cut off the peninsula. By this time, the advance westward had progressed sufficiently so the entire effort could be focused towards that end. On June 16th, General Collins ordered an attack all along the line from the Douve to Gorbeville. In the 90th Division, only 1 regiment was involved in the advance towards Urville. The 357th was temporarily withdrawn to a reserve position, and the 359th was attached to the 9th Division. Developments in the vicinity of Saint-Sauveur-le-Vicomte suddenly changed the whole tempo of the battle, but it was the attack of the 325th Glider Infantry, assisted by tanks, which routed the remaining enemy units east of the Douve. By noon, the 82nd Airborne had reached the east bank of the river, overlooking the town of Saint-Sauveur-le-Vicomte. From this position, the enemy could be observed withdrawing from the town. General Ridgway, realizing the possibilities of the situation, asked Corps' permission to cross the river into town and establish a bridgehead. Meanwhile, he had the artillery deliver fire on the roads leading north, west, and south from the town. An hour after the Corps' commander had approved General Ridgway's request, elements of the division were crossing the river, meeting little resistance. By nightfall, a firm bridgehead was established and secured with a perimeter defense 2,000 yards out from the town. Engineers bridged the Douve and tanks entered the town that evening. The events at Saint-Sauveur-le-Vicomte were a turning point in the whole drive westward. The success of the 82nd Airborne Division gave such impetus to the 9th Division's attack that it gathered a momentum which carried it swiftly across the peninsula. When the 9th Division had jumped off early in the day, its initial objectives were Rainville, Hauteville-Bocage, Orgland, and the ground west of Gorbeville. The attack had just begun when the order was given to push hard to the Douve. Even before the 82nd Airborne Division achieved its breakthrough, there had been signs that the enemy was withdrawing west of the Douve. At 11:30 hours, General Collins called the 9th Division headquarters and ordered General Eddy to have the 60th and 47th Infantry Regiments push hard to Saint-Colombe. General Eddy immediately ordered the 60th Infantry to push all 3 battalions to the river. Early in the afternoon, he urged the 47th to get on high ground east of Saint-Colombe. At Hauteville-Bocage, the 47th Infantry met stubborn resistance, as expected. This high ground was the last on which the enemy could make a stand east of the Douve. To make it possible for the 39th Infantry to get behind the 47th and help protect the north flank of the division, it was decided that the 39th would make a left turn and attack across the front of the 359th into Orgland. But a counterattack developed east of the town, and the attack was delayed until evening. The 1st Battalion, which led the assault, was unable to clear the village that night. The 359th Infantry's movement north was also held up. At Saint-Colombe, the 2nd Battalion, 60th Infantry Regiment crossed the river and held the west bank in the face of direct fire from enemy self-propelled guns somewhere in the vicinity of New. The battalion's ammunition ran low, but the 3rd Battalion moved to its aid. Next morning, the 3rd Battalion led the attack westward.